What's up, guys? Happy 420, and I guess happy Easter to everyone that celebrates. But for those of you who don't, this is 420, Ultimate Stoner Day, National Weed Day, whatever you want to call it. And first and foremost, I must apologize for not having uploaded for like the past like month and a half. It's not so much that I was out of ideas, it's just like I'm doing too much. I don't really have like a desire to upload like in my free time, or like I'd rather use my free time for other things. But now that like summer's nearing, it's spring, it's getting warmer around here, the weather's getting warmer. I want to get back into this. I definitely want to get back into making YouTube videos, and because I just kind of forgot how much I actually enjoyed doing this. So this is fun. And I definitely did not want to miss making a video for this occasion. Basically, I didn't really plan a video for 420 too much ahead in advance, but I definitely wanted to do something, so I figured why not just do something a little bit more laid back, as it should be on a day like this, and just talk about stoner bands that I like, or some of my favorite bands, stoner bands that maybe even if I haven't listened to like their whole discography, I just enjoy what I've heard from them. So not really much else to explain or get into here, so let's just get into it. All right, these bands are not really in any particular order, but I do want to start off with probably my favorite stoner band ever, Sleep. My favorite band is the Melvins, but I decided not to really include them on this list because, I don't know, I just don't think the Melvins are really like super like stoner all the time. I also decided not to include Black Sabbath on this list as well, because Black Sabbath, the majority of their discography is not really stoner. If anything, it's really just Master of Reality and maybe Volume 4 to an extent. The rest of like their first like 5 albums are mainly doom. Anything after that, going into the Dio and Tony Martin era, is more just straightforward heavy metal with elements of doom mixed in as well. So I decided not to include those two bands. So my favorite stoner band, Sleep, they're my second favorite band of all time, again only behind the Melvins. These guys are just incredible. The sheer heft of their riffs, they might be the heaviest band of all time. Matt Pike is definitely my favorite guitarist ever. Holy Mountain is one of my favorite albums ever. Al Cisneros, one of my favorite bassists of all time. His vocals also just like super deep and like have this like sort of like chant to them. And it kind of makes sense because on their first album, they had two guitarists, and I think his name was Justin Marler. He went off to go be a monk. So it kind of makes sense that they would have this sort of like meditative state to them. And after that, after Sleep would disband, Al Cisneros would go on to form Ohm, which I will mention later in this video. Yeah, it's just combined sort of like with like these sludgy influences, which was mainly present on their first album, and like with these sort of like kind of psychedelic, almost spiritual music. On top of that, Chris Achaeus and Jason Roeder's drumming, depending on which you prefer, both of them serve Sleep really, really well. And yeah, just really incredibly tight musical power trio. Their comeback album, The Sciences, also might just be the greatest comeback album of all time. I mean, they basically picked up right where they left off. And on that album, we got stuff like Marijuana's Theme, Sonic Titan, which was actually, funny enough, a song that they had written like decades previously. Geezer Butler and stuff, Antarctican's Thaw, seriously heavy stuff. So again, I know they're kind of a bit of a staple band. Some of this, a good amount of this list is going to be like staple stoner metal bands, but they still deserve to be mentioned, of course. And considering that like stoner metal is kind of like a bit of like, I guess, an underrated genre when people talk about metal as a whole, not a lot of metalheads really discuss stoner metal like outside of the stoner metal like niche community. So yeah, it is kind of like a very niche genre. So definitely wanted to like talk about these bands because there's also not too much discussion about them on the internet. So definitely wanted to do that. This list is also going to be like, again, a mix of like stoner metal and like stoner rock bands as well. And some of these guys are a bit borderline, and so is this next one that I'm about to mention. That would be Wolfmother. They're a band I've known about for quite a while now. My dad used to like play their debut album in Cosmic Egg, and that's just how I would like hear about these guys. I really got into them like a couple years ago now. And again, they are a band that is a little borderline. I wouldn't like necessarily call them straight stoner rock, but they definitely have that like sort of 2000s stoner rock / like alternative rock feel to them. Their self-titled debut album is a masterpiece through and through. Absolutely check that out if you haven't already. Also, it's definitely worth it to give Cosmic Egg a listen, and even their 2014 album New Crown. Great stuff. New Crown went for like a bit of a more like garage rock sort of raw sound, but it still worked in its own ways. And Cosmic Egg, while not as strong as the debut, definitely had some really good material on its own on there. And again, while it wouldn't top the debut, they did a more respectable job following the debut up with that. Lately, I feel like Wolfmother have just really kind of descended into this sort of just generic, like, 2010s, 2020s, like, hard rock revival band, kind of in the same vein as, like, Greta Van Fleet was with their first couple of albums, or even, I guess, to an extent, Dirty Honey. It's like, at this point, in their last few albums, I just feel they haven't really brought anything, like, fun or new to the table. And I mean, again, I know these guys maybe aren't trying to innovate anymore, and they weren't really even super innovative to begin with, but I feel like they just had something special about them with their first few albums. And lately, albums like Rock and Roll Baby, Rocked Out, and even their 2016 album Victorious definitely kind of saw a bit of a decrease in quality and went into more generic territory. Again, still great band. Hopefully they make another new album and it's actually really good. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. Next up is a bit of another staple band for the genre, but Electric Wizard, and definitely not just the Dope Throne stuff. They have plenty of great stuff across all their albums. Their newer stuff, I will admit, I haven't listened to as much. I've maybe heard a few songs from Wizard Bloody Wizard or Time to Die. For the most part, like, their first 3 albums definitely is where I've heard the most stuff, specifically Come My Fanatics, which is a fantastic album. So much great stuff, just the sheer, like, rawness, but, like, thickness of the riffs. It has this weird, like, tone that's almost just hard to describe. Stuff like Return Trip, Wizard in Black, amazing, seriously heavy stuff. Also, the Super Coven EP, awesome stuff as well. Dope Throne, can't really go wrong with that. It's definitely got its praises sung quite a bit amongst the metal community. It is probably the most talked about stoner metal album outside of just outside of the stoner metal niche community, other than maybe Dope Smoker by Sleep, which I actually, funnily enough, forgot to mention when I was talking about Sleep. But Dope Throne, again, continues the same, I guess, formula or, like, ideas that made Come On Fanatics so great and just expands on them exponentially. The title track, Dope Throne, that medley of, like, Weird Tales, Electric Frost, whatever else was on that. And, of course, the first 2 songs, Vinum Sabathi and Funeralopolis, which Funeralopolis is, without a doubt, one of the best metal songs ever written. The riff is just impeccable. So Electric Wizard, again, I know they definitely get talked about a lot, so I don't want to spend too much time on them because they kind of have their praises sung already, but still, great band. And, yeah, definitely deserves to be on any stoner metal list. Next up, a bit of a lesser known one, which I actually already did a video on these guys. This was the side project of Jay Mascis of Dinosaur Jr., as well as was King Tuff or Kyle Thomas. He was involved in some other stuff as well. And Dave Sweetapple, who unfortunately did pass away a while ago. But these guys only made 2 albums in the 2000s. They had their self-titled album and then Paralyzed, but both of those albums are just incredible. Their first album is definitely more of a stoner album. Tracks on that I would recommend checking out, of course, Seer, Black Saint, and Changing, and Isadora. All great stuff. Like, this album, one of my favorite albums of all time, and definitely one of the best stoner albums of all time. Should definitely, like, go on, like, any, like, underrated stoner metal albums list for sure. Their second album, Paralyzed, isn't as good as the debut, and it is a little less stoner. They did incorporate, like, a little bit more punk influence into this one, but it's still good. Tracks like 1,000 Miles Per Hour, Sweet Sue, Old Trap Line, Mutated, all good stuff. Definitely would recommend giving both of these albums a spin. I actually have them both on vinyl. I'm not going to pull them out now. Great stuff. So again, Witch, if you want to check them out. Personally, probably not just my favorite, like, stoner rock band, but, like, probably my favorite rock band of all time, Fu Manchu. Fu Manchu, these guys just know how to incorporate pure fun into their music, ignoring even the stoner category or whatever. The riffs are just, like, some of the most fun riffs to listen to. Personally, my favorite album by them is their 1997 album, The Action Is Go. Just so much good stuff to find on that one. We have, of course, Evil Eye, Urethane, Anodizer, Burning Road, and of course the legendary, monstrous 7-minute Saturn 3 that just sounds quite literally like a journey through the cosmos that takes its sweet time. It's incredible. Beyond this album, of course, there's their first album, No One Rides for Free, as well as their other couple of first few albums, Daredevil and In Search Of, all classics. That like album, their like album run in the 90s is probably their best. Once the 2000s hit, they definitely started going in a bit of a more commercial direction, but the material from those albums was still good. Stuff like California Crossing, We Must Obey, and of course, King of the Road. And I've also really enjoyed their newer stuff as well, specifically their newest album, The Return of Tomorrow, as well as their 2018 album, Clone of the Universe. They really just haven't had a bad album. They're one of the most consistent bands I've heard. And this is kind of another case where like a band just kind of makes the same album over and over again, but like it isn't like to their detriment, and they have a formula that they stick with, and it just works because I love that formula. Their formula is basically just crafting fun songs. A lot of the times I've seen this in interviews with their vocalist and guitarist Scott Hill. They mentioned basically how they record stuff in the studio is they just record it all live, basically everything in like 1 or 2 takes. And they probably must be really tightly rehearsed and able to do that. But I just love that like there's still bands like doing that out there, and it's not just like a thing of the past, or really like every band just like records each part separately. So yeah, they always they always know how to bring good energy, good fun, great riffs, great bass parts, and of course, gotta love the cowbell that's present in a lot of their songs. It's just fun. So Fu Manchu. Also would like to give a shout out to Nebula as well. They're basically the same band as Fu Manchu. Nebula is made up of former members of Fu Manchu. They basically sound almost identical. I haven't listened to them enough, but I really enjoyed their song Giant from I think it's their 2001 album, I believe it's called Charge or something like that. They basically are, like I said, they're basically the same as Fu Manchu. They just expand on the more like jam side of Fu Manchu and explore that territory a little bit more. So I guess not as much a explicitly stoner band as much as they are like a doom metal band or a sludge metal band, maybe even a little bit of thrash thrown in there as well. But since it is Matt Pike, I might as well include it in the list anyway. We've got High on Fire. I feel like High on Fire definitely gets talked about a lot more than Sleep or any other like projects related to Al Cisneros or Matt Pike. But I mean, High on Fire definitely deserves their praise. Their first album, The Art of Self-Defense, is definitely almost like a copy of the Sleep era, but I think that's why I really love it. It's one of my favorite High on Fire albums. It's just like 6 like colossal tracks of just stony riffs. Check out the song 10,000 Years from that album. Also maybe the 10-minute Dirge Master of Fists from that album as well, just to see what I mean. Once they got to their third album, Blessed Black Wings, is when they started exploring the sludge territory. And their 2007 album, Death Is This Communion, definitely got like a little bit more brutal and brash with their sound. That was when they started doing that. Again, much like Fu Manchu, they've basically made the same album almost over and over again, but each album has like each album it's like the same, but it's not quite the same. Every album has like all these little differences spread without, but for some reason, and somehow they've managed to be incredibly consistent. Like they've never had a bad album. And their newest album, Cometh the Storm, that just came out last year, might actually be my favorite album by them. It's just a mixture of their like brutal, sludgy, dense riffs that were like on albums like Death Is This Communion or 2012's De Vermis Mysteriis or Luminiferous. That album is great as well, but also like coupled with their stoner elements that were present in Sleep or on their debut album. So yeah, overall fantastic band. Another example of a really consistent band that has just managed to stay on top throughout their whole like now 20 plus year career. So they're great. They've been great. Next up, probably the like forefathers of stoner rock in general that isn't like from the 60s like Blue Cheer or Blue Oyster Cult. I'm talking of course about Kyuss. Kyuss is like, we're kind of the first band to do this sort of whole like heavy rock that was like they were the first band to do this sort of like rock music that like wasn't quite metal. Maybe it was metal, but it was still like insanely heavy. Like Josh Homme, guitarist for Kyuss, and of course went on to do Queens of the Stone Age, which I'll talk about in a second. For the album Blues for the Red Sun, he ran his guitar through the bass cabinet, and that really gave it that sort of like low, thick, and deep sound that it has on that album. And they were really innovators in that sort of sense. There was not really like any bands doing this at that time. And they really got what's funny is they were often mistakenly labeled as grunge by like Kurt Cobain himself. There was an interview where he saw Kyuss and he's like, "Oh, I didn't realize grunge came from the nice California desert." They weren't grunge. They were something else, something that hadn't quite been created yet, and that would become stoner rock in the 90s. And bands like the aforementioned Fu Manchu, Monster Magnet would like sort of evolve it into their own thing. But Kyuss, again, yet another consistent band. I think this one's a bit easier to say that with because they only have 4 albums. But again, no bad albums, and but much unlike like Fu Manchu or even High on Fire, all their albums are very tonally different. Not like super drastically different, but like each of them has their sort of own style. And it could almost be attributed to like the way Mastodon's first 4 albums are described as like the earth, wind, water, fire, like sort of elements. Like their first album, Wretch, could be like the earth album, and it's definitely got a much more like raw sound, and apparently that wasn't intentional. It's just like the producer like wouldn't let them like go super like turn on the fuzz or whatever. And it's definitely got like a more like straightforward, like kind of heavy rock album. Blues for the Red Sun is often described as the fire album, and it's probably the heaviest album Kyuss ever put out. There's definitely a lot of like straightforward, like just heavy songs, and like sort of there's also some jam sections as well. Welcome to Sky Valley is the wind album and definitely expands more on the jam aspects of Blues for the Red Sun. Tracks like Gardenia and Space Cadet, as well as like Demon Cleaner, really kind of like amplify this sort of like jam aspects of the band, and it's considered by many to be their masterpiece. And then their final album, And the Circus Leaves Town, is their Water album. The production there is a little bit more subdued. The album overall doesn't sound like, I guess, like as hot as like the previous 3 albums, and it's probably the most different Kyuss album as well. There's a lot more like just experimentation on that one, and it was an interesting way to go out. So Kyuss, great band. Definitely run through their discography if you haven't already. It won't take you that long. It's only 4 albums. And yeah, they're really innovative. And when I hear people talking about Josh Homme, I always hear people discussing Queens of the Stone Age. And while as great as they are, I don't think Kyuss gets enough love. Also, John Garcia is an objectively better singer than Josh Homme. I'm sorry. As good as Queens is, I don't really care for Josh Homme's like sort of weird half falsetto vocals. John Garcia's like sort of like howl, has like a sort of howl to his voice. I just love it so much. It's awesome. And not to mention Brant Bjork, fantastic drummer. But speaking of Queens of the Stone Age, I still did want to include them in this list as I still do think they are a good band. And their first 2 albums in particular are definitely stoner rock. Mainly their self-titled debut. A lot of like the riffs and like tone on that album is pretty much a direct continuation of where Kyuss left off, but it's still like not the same. Like I kind of like to think of it as like Type O Negative's first album. It's like a more matured version of Kyuss, but like a less evolved Queens of the Stone Age, if you know what I mean. They would kind of sort of establish their own sound on their Rated R album, which came out in 2000, and on that album saw them be like go in a more like commercial accessible direction while still maintaining the stoner elements. And then 2002 Songs for the Deaf, widely considered to be their masterpiece. And yeah, there's just so much variety on that album. It's like it almost flows like a concept album of sorts, like you're listening to the radio, and I really like those touches. Later albums, they definitely went into like a more like regular alternative rock direction. On albums like Era Vulgaris, there's a little bit more like industrial elements there as well. Like Clockwork kind of sounds sort of similar to the Arctic Monkeys album AM that came out that same year in 2013. Villains, the album almost went in a more like dance rock direction, though I think their latest album, In Times New Roman, definitely kind of went back towards the more stoner direction, but yet still with that like alternative rock sound. Either way, Queens of the Stone Age, pretty good band. Again, not my favorite ever, but I still do enjoy a lot of their records. And while it's not a band I find myself listening to like on a daily basis, I still like to pop on like Songs for the Deaf or Rated R every once in a while. So yeah, good stuff. The last of the three like Al Cisneros slash Matt Pike projects related to sleep, or I guess there's only like two of the offshoot bands, would be Ohm. Again, much like sleep itself, I guess. Ohm is like the least, is the like the one of like this, I guess, like sort of like trinity of bands that are like interconnected that I've seen discussed the least. And I think that could be also because they haven't put out an album since 2012, but they definitely are almost like the complete opposite of High on Fire, where High on Fire went more brutal, Ohm went more atmospheric and almost spiritual. A lot of their lyrical themes like center around like, I guess, like gods, deities, and like religion as well. I mean, they literally have an album titled God is Good. And yeah, a lot of their albums usually only consist of like 2, 3, maybe 4 songs that most of the time stretch past like the 10-minute mark. And they're like a mix of like stoner metal and like almost like trance music. I could tell they could also probably inspired by like the drone movements of Sun. And oh yeah, they were a band I forgot to include on this list. I guess I'll give them a shout out, although I haven't listened to them enough. Sun, like just pure drone, not really much else I can say. Great innovative band though. But Ohm definitely has like those more like psychedelic elements and like experimental like jams of sleep in mind, and just really like elevates those. I hope they make a new album soon because man, there's albums they put out in the 2000s and early 2010s were so good. I hope they make another one eventually, especially considering like how inactive Sleep has been. I know Al Cisneros had been like talking about a new Ohm album forever, but like so far we've seen nothing. So hopefully we get one soon. I don't know. I guess not another like borderline band between stoner and doom, but like really the only one of the like the doom metal big four that I would really consider on this list would be Pentagram, of course. Now Pentagram have been blowing up. I've done some videos on Pentagram myself on this channel over like the past like couple months, and I guess like the only reason I would like include them on this list is maybe like their early stuff, like the stuff from First Days Here. Like the other rest of the doom metal big four, that would be Candlemass, Saint Vitus, and Trouble. I don't really consider to be stoner enough. Maybe Trouble to an extent, but like Candlemass is much more doom than anything else, and I'd say the same thing goes with Saint Vitus. Pentagram, specifically the First Days Here compilation, is like 70s stoner rock, or like I guess like heavy rock, like at its finest, and stuff like Forever My Queen, Review Your Choices, you know, all that, like those early demos that they had put out before that, like they put out Relentless in 85 and stuff. That's really stoner rock if anything else. And it's also insanely heavy for the time as well, because like this stuff came out, we have to remember this stuff came out in like 1972, 1973. This is when like the heaviest thing was like Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. So this was like really innovative, and it's been said that Pentagram technically are the first American heavy metal band. I mean, maybe technically isn't Sir Lord Baltimore from the US? I think if they are, then I guess that would make them, but Pentagram come like really close to that. So yeah, and I'm glad they're blowing up now because they have been like basically under the radar for the past 50 years. Another band that I again don't really feel gets talked about enough would be Dead Meadow. Dead Meadow is not really metal in like any way. They're more stoner rock with like elements of psychedelic rock, and they kind of fit with him almost like the indie scene. But either way, I decided to throw them in because like their jams, I guess I've never smoked, but I would imagine their music would be like perfect for getting high to, as well as just zoning out in general. Their first album is like a perfect example of like semi-heavy riffs, really fuzzy stuff, combined with like the psychedelia of like Pink Floyd, specifically like Syd Barrett Pink Floyd, it's just like this sort of like combination of all that, and it works so well. I'd say the song, if I had to pick one Dead Meadow song to recommend, it would have to be Beyond the Fields We Know from their 2000 self-titled debut. It's just basically an amalgamation of like their sound entirely. Pretty much represents the band. Later stuff, they definitely went into almost a more indie direction, specific mainly on their latest album, Voyager to Voyager, which just came out like little more than just 3 weeks ago, and it's a pretty good album. Definitely would recommend giving it a spin. But also stuff like their Feathers album or Old Growth definitely have that more like sort of indie, almost like bedroom sound. But yeah, great stuff. Definitely would recommend giving self-titled debut album as well as their albums Howls from the Hills and Shivering King and Others. So check them out. Also wanted to give a shout out to the band Earthless as well. Very probably the most similar band to Dead Meadow I can think of. I haven't listened to all their albums really in full, but from what I have heard from them, they're basically mostly instrumental, like stoner slash like psychedelic jams. Probably be perfect for like listening to in the desert, or like I don't know, like the Joshua Tree like state park in California. It'd be awesome to like just listen to that like during like a sunset or at night. It'd be great. Another band that I don't really have full context on, but I really liked what I've heard so far, would be The Sword. I know these guys kind of initially got a bit of flack when they came out. Apparently like everybody was like saying they're like posers or whatever, but I mean, I don't know, never really got that. Mainly was their first album, Age of Winters, when that came out in 2006. Apparently the metal community was like all over that album, and like not in a good way. At least that's what I remember seeing on the Metal Archives. That has quite a bit of negative reviews on there. But I mean, dude, it's a great album. Great stuff on there. Freya, Iron Swan. Can't go wrong with that. Also really enjoyed their 2012 Apocryphon album. Mainly the title track is incredible. It's like got this like keyboard intro, and then when that riff comes in, it's just oof, feels like you're just in the cosmos. Unfortunately, they did disband in 2022, but then they did reunite just last year. I don't know if we'll get any other new stuff from them. We haven't seen an album since 2018's Used Futures, so maybe we'll get some new stuff, but hey, who knows? Anyway, great band. I need to still check out more of their stuff myself, but still, definitely give them a listen. Bongzilla, also maybe a shout out to Bong Ripper as well. I initially forgot to write them down for like the inclusion in this list, but Bong Ripper are actually from my hometown, Chicago. I live in like the Chicago area. Those guys like basically make entirely instrumental albums of like 3 to 4 tracks and go like insanely heavy with their stuff. I still need to check out more of it. They just put out an album last year and it was pretty good. But Bongzilla definitely continue this sort of like Electric Wizard vibes and really up the marijuana imagery. Like take a look at any of their album covers. A Marijuanakin, The Gateway, I think that's what it's called. It's just hazes of weed imagery and just smoke and bongs and stuff. It's incredible. Anyway, the title track to their Marijuanakin album, probably the most known song I would guess, but one of their best. Just great for like zoning out to and just absorbing the heaviness of it. It's awesome. Again, another band that I still need to really check out in full, but Bongzilla, great stuff. Would definitely also recommend for a 420 smoke shot. 420 smoke sesh. All right, well, we got to, it looks like the last band on the list, Acid King. Again, pretty similar to like Bongzilla and Bong Ripper in the sense that like a lot of their stuff is just very, very jam oriented and insanely heavy. Busey Woods is probably like their most like I talked about album in like the small circles that they are talked about in anyway. And yeah, it's really good, but I also really enjoyed their 3 album from 2005. The stuff on that album is like among the heaviest that I've heard. The guitar tone just goes like, it's just so deep. It's mind-boggling. It's also incredible. Also, I forgot to mention I'm repping my Sleep shirt today in honor of 420. Can't go wrong with that. So yeah, Acid King album 3 as well as Busey Woods would definitely be great places to start. They only have 5 albums, so very small limited discography, but the stuff they have put out, just go give it a listen. These guys are super underrated. And that is it for the list. I did want to mention 2 new bands that I've been really getting into lately. That would be the bands Windhand and Monolord. Both are kind of pretty similar to like a band like Bong Ripper in the sense that a lot of their stuff is like super like just like kind of hazy, like thick dense riffs. Also, again, like Electric Wizard as well. Just like riffs that sound like you're just clouded in smoke and can make a person who's never smoked in their life feel high as hell. So, yeah. Drop any other band recommendations in the comments below. I want to know what you guys have been listening to for 420, even if it's not like stoner metal or stoner rock, even if it's like, I don't know, if it's like reggae or whatever. Reggae is great for 420, of course, or like, I don't know, like some jazz fusion. Just drop like what your 420 playlist would look like in the comments. I definitely want to check out what you guys have been listening to, and obviously try to recommend some new bands for me to check out as well. I definitely want to explore some more stoner metal and stoner rock as well. And yeah, again, I apologize for not being like not uploading for like 10 million years. But I mean, this video is probably going to end up being like 20 minutes long, seeing as how long I've been recording. So I guess here you go. Anyway, and I still do want to do some new videos in like the coming days or the coming week. The Melvins just came out with a new album over this weekend, and while I kind of stopped doing album reviews because it was kind of getting stressful to like keep up with every album release every week, especially if they were like from bands that I just never heard of or never listened to before hearing that album. It's like, okay, I can't do every release. Plus there's other YouTube channels that already do that. I don't need to do that. But because the Melvins are my favorite band, I definitely want to cover their new album, and plus also they just don't get a lot of coverage on YouTube in general. So yeah. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and yeah, happy 420, and I'll see you all later.